today I am joined by Benjamin Smith from Bikeability. He will explain who Bikeability are if you don't know in a moment or two. Benjamin is going to take us through today, as I said, some of the work that Bikeability do to increase cycle safety and to educate people about how they can participate in helping keep cyclists and our roads more, widely safer through more, courteous driving around cyclists. We're going to talk about a specific project that DIA worked with Bikeability on, and the evolution of that project. And you'll also be able to ask us any questions today, or give us your views on cycling in general, cycling initiatives, any ideas you have about how we can promote, let's say, cycling better via ADIs to their pupils. We've just been talking about some ideas that we would have about promoting to pupils how they should possibly do a bikeability course if they've never been out on the road and in traffic on a bike. It will really help them with their sense of vulnerability and risk when they actually become a driver. If you just put something in a metal box, it's not necessarily increasing their sense of vulnerability in traffic. Whereas if they're on a bike, they suddenly get it that they're very vulnerable. So, help you guys helping to promote maybe some cycle savvy sessions for yourself and for pupils isn't necessarily a bad idea. So anyway, I am going to stop waffling. And I'm going to hand you over to Benjamin, who's going to kick off and tell us all about the work of Bikeability and the specific project.
Brilliant, thank you, Carly, very much, and it's a privilege to be with you for this webinar, and I hope it's a helpful, informative, and interesting one for you. Please do ask any questions that come to mind in the chat, and we can address those as we go, or if you don't have time at the end. So a quick sort of bit further information on me. So Benjamin Smith, I am Director of Development for the Bikeability Trust. It's a role that I've held for 4 years now, I think, but my career has been within cycle training for pretty much all of it, as soon as I heard about this program called Bikeability, trained as an instructor, worked as a training provider, and probably held every position you could possibly hold within this industry, and to find myself here, which is a real privilege. And who are the trusts? So we are the administrative arm of the Department for Transport for their cycle training program. So Bikeability is the DFT's approved form of cycle training. We've obviously based upon the national standard for cycle training. You have a national standard for driving instruction. There is a very similar one for cycle training with the same six roles. So slightly different content under each role, but they are deliberately similar, so that we can provide, I guess, the most holistic, currently the most holistic approach to driving or road use instruction, and that was a deliberate choice, and worked with the DVSA on that a number of years ago. So the program itself is, just to give you an idea of scale, this last financial year we delivered through our team of 300-ish registered training providers and 2,500 instructors to a total of around 460,000 children received training last year, and that's a record year for us, and we are every year we've delivered more and more, obviously COVID notwithstanding, and looking to achieve Department for Transport, UK government rather, ambition of being able to provide cycle training to every child and every adult who wants it by 2025. Whether the funding is there to achieve that ambition in the next financial year is a question we don't yet have the answer to, but the infrastructure is. So that is our bread and butter, and to essentially administer the grants, work with the every local authority within England to do so, to quality assure the programme. But there are a number of other projects that we're involved in as well. One of them being cycle savvy driving, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the whole number of others. So the ones, I guess, to draw your attention to mostly are looking at working with schools, what we've called our in-school pilot, looking at delivering sort of the really early stuff, balance and learn to ride, through teachers and sports companies in early years and nurseries, so that then we can really maximise the potential of the professional bikeability programme, and through to online and virtual and immersive reality training programs, which we've piloted a number of approaches over the last couple of years, and looking to build on that in the next calendar year, next academic year as well. So it's a range of different projects that me and my team are responsible for, all within the grand ambition and aim of seeing more people cycling more often and more safely. And so the more safely element really is where this particular project comes in. And obviously it's been a privilege to work with organisations such as the DIA on it. They've been sort of an incredibly helpful member of the working group for this project, and that relationship will continue in other projects in the future, I'm sure. But so that's me, that's the programme, and I just to apologise briefly as well. It's going to be a lot of me, my face talking at you, so please do ask questions. But I have had very little time this week to actually come up with a PowerPoint presentation for you, so it's going to be sort of me talking at you with notes, and I hope that's.
If anybody
okay.
has any questions and wants to chat, if you haven't found it yet, in your toolbar on Zoom, you'll see a chat function. If you click on that, you can engage in the chat with me or with anybody else who's on the webinar, share your views, etc. And I'll monitor that chat. Also, if you've got any questions for Ben or for me, you can put those in the Q&A section. You'll find the toolbar as well. Sorry, Ben.
No, perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. And I'll try not to be too monotone as well, which I know I'm very, very prone to. So just to outline the project itself. So cycle savvy driving has been quite a long time in the making, and I'm sure some of you have participated in the first round of it. But it first came to this light word. So it kicked off really in 2018 through the cycling walking investment strategy. Then so Jesse Norman at the time was sort of responsible for, I guess, signing off a lot of that. I know he's back as a minister with Department for within transport now, after some time away, which we find helpful. But so that's 2018 cycling walking investment strategy outlined a number of projects, and one of them was looking at what was then the perceived lack of cycling instruction for learner drivers and approved driving instructors like yourselves, and that was the nutshell that really kicked off this whole project. So fast forward to I think 2020 or 2021, the original launch was due for sort of March 2020. We all know what happened then, so we postponed it for a year. Unfortunately, yeah, that was still not a good time to launch, because that was when all UADIs were allowed back to work for the first time in about a year. So there was no good time to launch it, but we still got some really helpful results. So what we came up with, working with the working group, which included DIA, who are very, very heavily involved actually, was a 2-hour online training module and a 3.5-hour practical training module. For mostly COVID reasons, the practical training was and logistics practical training was not taken up anywhere near as much as we had hoped. But again, that's fine. But we did have 2,500 ADIs take part in the online training, which was incredibly helpful and gave us some really, really good results. So the 2-hour online training had four lessons where we looked at mindset, national standards, cycle training program, rules of the road, and what cycle training looks like in practice, with text, video, some talking heads, some CGI clips, which we worked with the DVSA on as well, and a set of questions or quizzes, checking questions at the end of each lesson. And we had some really helpful specific feedback from ADIs on a lot of that content, and thank you if that was some of you as well, and some of that has fed into the extension project. But we also evaluated the project with Ipsos UK, and some really positive stuff for us came out of it. The sort of basic headlines were sort of around 80 to 90% of all ADIs who went through the training learned something, would change something in the way they or the information they pass on to their learners, and would recommend the training to their learners and to other ADIs, which for us we were incredibly pleased with. Another key objective of the evaluation was to look at whether it changed attitudes amongst ADIs to vulnerable road users, and the training did not do that. And well, it did slightly, but not statistically significant. We dug into that a little bit more, and that result was not a problem, because when we looked into attitudes pre and post surveys, again, some of you I'm sure would have done it, attitudes amongst those ADIs who took part towards vulnerable road users, and in particular cycle riders, was really positive, so there was very little need for that to change. But that is all within a report prepared by Ipsos UK, currently held by DFT, not yet published by DFT though, and we hope they'll publish it very soon. We keep asking. I'm more at liberty to share the results, the headline stats with you there. So we've looked at how the project came about, what it looked like, and the results thereof. But we're now, as of January this year, Department of Transport working to extend the project based upon the learning that that was taken from the first pilot. So again, this kicked off at the start of this year, working with Active Travel England, working with a working group including the Driving Instructors Association and others within the driver training community, and Road Safety Division of Department of Transport as well, importantly. So we reviewed all the feedback very thoroughly, took that on board. We have moved the training program from the existing platform to a new platform. Quite a lot of just jiggling the content around into sort of a more approachable, more appropriate sort of build. Again, going through similar content, looking at mindset, looking at the national standards, how cycle training fits in, and looking at what is taught, and looking at what driver behaviour should be as a result. It was also important to tie this in with sort of recent, not so recent now, but recent changes to the highway code, which again I'm sure you're all very well versed in from sort of January 2022, and we've built that into the next training module. We are not yet in a position to release the next training module, again because we are working across two different Department of Transport agencies, which does so sometimes different policy objectives don't quite align. So there's a couple of things to iron out before we then sort of are able to finalise and release and test the next version of training. And I'll go through the particular changes that we went through. I know there is a hand up, and I think Carly, you've asked. I think it's Mervyn. Again, Mervyn, you're welcome to put a question in chat, or we can potentially unmute if you have a question now.
If you want us to unmute you, Mervyn, I can allow you to talk. If you wanted to ask a question, just type into the chat with me. If you want me to unmute you, or you just want to type your question.
But if not, we can take it at the end. We'll give you a moment. Cool. Okay, I'll move on, as I haven't seen anything from you, Evan. So the extension project, we have reduced the length of it from sort of 2 hours to 60 minutes. Made it a little bit more interactive, more video, a little bit more bite size, shorter quizzes, and the main objectives that we've set out is that anyone who takes part, whether it be an ADI or a learner driver, is that they understand their responsibilities when driving to take care of and reduce the danger to those who are more vulnerable to themselves. Recognise how people cycle, whether they're trained or untrained, because again, you will have both. You encounter both when you're driving. So sort of, you can recognise how people cycling may sort of negotiate roads, junctions, infrastructure, and really understand the reasons for this. Again, whether they're trained or untrained. In particular, looking at sort of overtaking and interaction with cycle rides at junctions, which again, if you look at KSI stats, that is where most things come undone when we sort of really start to dig into that. So we felt it was important to address that. And another key difference from the first pilot to the extension is the much greater emphasis on learner drivers. The first pilot, there was a mechanism for ADIs to share with their learner drivers. That wasn't taken up to very much at all. But we felt it's really, really important to make sure that the material that you were getting as ADIs was made really widely available to learner drivers as well. So there's going to be a much more concerted effort to recruit and learner drivers, and for them to take part in the training, give feedback on it as well within the next extension phase. And obviously, as I mentioned before, we needed to incorporate the sort of the recent changes to the highway code and what that means, and we'll go into the detail a little bit more. But in particular, and I'm sure you're all very well aware of this, but the introduction of the hierarchy, again, arguably looking after those more vulnerable to yourselves is something that all should be doing anyway. But it's important to have it reinforced so clearly, and obviously for cycle riders, the important thing is that they look after those more vulnerable to themselves as well. So people walking when they're in shared space with pedestrians, or when pedestrians are crossing roads. So that's baked into the new training. Again, the change where all road users should give way to those who are waiting to cross a road at the top of a junction, instead of just when they are. That is baked into the training as well. And I've mentioned mindset a number of times. Obviously, we'll do our best with all cycle training to create predictable and calm road users who look on other road users as people, not just putting them in a category of, I know, white fan man or school run mum or cyclist or lorry driver or whatever. We really felt it's important that people understand that the road is made up of people going about their journeys, wanting to go from A to B without incident. And for those of you who've seen what Think Campaign have done with the promotion and advertising, knowledge campaign around the highway code, that's the approach that they took as well, sort of fueled by quite a lot of really helpful research by Kantar, I think. So again, it's a message that quite a lot of us are trying to get out there, and I'm sure most of you included in that as well. So that gives you again a flavour of where we're going with the forthcoming extension project, and that will be made available hopefully as soon as possible. I don't have a date yet, but through to every ADI, and we advertise through DVSA and through organisations such as DIA and the other membership organisations, so that you won't be able to miss the opportunity to take part, and feedback, and hopefully we get some really helpful learning for yourselves that you can then pass on to your learner drivers as well. And hopefully again that doesn't come across as patronising. I think we did our absolute best with the training to not come across as patronising in any way, because we don't want to, we shouldn't, we can't, because you are also experts in your field as well. But just wanted to draw attention to things that maybe you might not have thought about for a little while. But in the remaining time that I've got left, and again, if you've got questions, do please use the chat. I just want to go over some key messages for you. I guess a bit of a heads up, really, if you will, for the forthcoming training, and sort of reasons behind it, and then on what we teach, what you need to look out for, and some nuances to the highway code. And then if you've got questions, we'll take them. Obviously there is a national standard for cycle training, and within that you have a concept of the 4 core functions, which is an approach to using the road. So I think that within advanced motorbike training, you have IPSCA. What we have is what we've called the 4 core functions, which is essentially the 4 things that we think are most important for somebody who's using the road predominantly for the first time, and in this case on 2 wheels. And so the 4 core functions are really simple: observation, communication, positioning, and priorities. And you could probably translate to good road use in any vehicle. But that's what we've distilled that down to within the national standard, and what bikeability training itself is built upon. So within observation, new riders, new road users have to have, and this is how they are assessed as well, awareness of the surroundings, of their own surroundings and the actions of others. The communication is being able to communicate their intentions clearly. Position is to choose and maintain the most appropriate position to ride on the road. And the priorities is can understand the priorities and rules that apply on the road, and in particular at junctions, in line with the highway code. And I'll just spend a little bit more time on each of those. So within observation, again, I know this is an absolute key message that you'll be teaching your learner drivers as well. Again, throughout the number of activities that a cycle rider is taken upon, the activities are progressive. We start with simply starting and stopping on a road, and then we're in a really quiet environment, to going past a parked car, past a side road, and then each turn that you can possibly do at a T-junction, all in very quiet environments, before we then sort of build up to progressively busier and busier and busier, so that we're managing that level of risk, and giving new road users opportunity to become confident, and confident, competent, and consistent. So the three C's that we use throughout training as well. So awareness, so important. This, it helps people cycling and people driving the course to identify the hazards and assess where the people are, and then more importantly, know what to do with that information. But the observation being how you gather that information, and for you, and obviously when you're on a cycle, how you do it is just by looking around, so that when you're driving, when you see somebody looking around behind them, over to their right, to their left, hopefully they're not daydreaming, but they're looking intentionally for a reason, so that they know again who's around them. So if you see a cycle rider looking over their shoulder, it's so that they can know who's around. So they may be trying to establish a bit of a temporary relationship on road through eye contact, understanding that the driver has seen them or not. Sometimes eye contact is hard to actually do in a sort of fast-paced, changing road environment. But at least by looking at somebody's face, you can get a really good idea of what are their intentions. Have they seen me? Where are they going? What are they about to do next? So eye contact being the sort of the gold standard, but realizing that actually that's quite difficult to achieve sometimes. So again, when you see that happening, and a message for you and for your learner drivers, it's that cycle rider is gathering some information, possibly to do something with it, whether that's signal direction of travel, change their road position. We'll look at road position in a bit more detail in a minute, from what we call primary to secondary or secondary to primary, and there's different reasons. Again, this is in the highway code, in new addition to the highway code, but the reasons that they may do that, obviously they need to not just swing out or swing in. They need to understand what they are moving into, and choose therefore the time to do that. So that's your observation. When you see riders looking around, they are more likely than not about to do something, and and sort of reducing your perhaps proximity or speed as a result may help them do that more confidently. Communication in cars, obviously you have your indicators. Cycling, there's the most obvious is an arm signal, right or left, nice and clear, which direction you're traveling in, if you're a junction, or whether you're switching lanes or not. But there's other ways that look behind, or trying to look at, or establishing eye contact, or your road position itself, in addition to the hand signal, also gives clues. It's communication clues from the rider that, again, they are about to do something. And the hand signals are obviously the very clear ones of, okay, I'm turning left, I'm turning right. And if there is not one, example, perhaps approaching a roundabout, they may be sort of going straight across, or second exit if there's one directly opposite from them. A couple of reasons why riders may not use hand signals: if there may be a sort of control issue. If you're going down a hill at speed and there's a junction at the bottom, it may be more important for the rider to be on their brakes rather than signalling, and it's a more advanced skill to both brake and signal at the same time, or you're using one hand for each, or you may have riders with one limb. Again, that's going to be fairly difficult to brake and signal at the same time. There are you'll see some riders with things like little indicators on the back of the bike itself, but most road users are not looking out for that. But you can get them on the end of either the back of the bike or the end of the handlebars. So communication, really thing that's baked into every activity that we teach cycle riders, and again, you are looking for those clues that the rider is about to do something. And this is all with the caveat that this is a trained rider who is doing what they quote unquote should. We'll look at untrained riders in a moment. But row position, put really simply, a rider at any point needs to choose and maintain the most appropriate row position, and there are only two row positions, obviously, that we give, that we present to riders as a choice, that we call them primary and secondary. Primary is the centre of the moving traffic lane. It's not the centre of the lane itself, because they vary in width, and you have things like parked cars or all sorts going on, but it's defined very much as the centre of the moving traffic lane, so that that is very much in relation to where the traffic is going. So, for example, at a wide Belmouth junction, you may in fact have two primary positions where you have two flows of traffic, to one turning right and one turning left. So very important that is the centre of, sorry, I'm repeating myself, the centre of the moving traffic lane, not just the lane. And again, this is in the highway code. It's, and the reasons for it is so that the rider is as visible as possible to other road users, and that they it's also a message that that rider does not want to be overtaken. So should not be overtaken. So riders are encouraged to take it when at a junction. Obviously, overtaking at a junction is illegal. But when you're in the centre of a lane, perhaps going around a roundabout, when you're in sort of busy traffic and you're able to keep up the speed of the traffic, other traffic, then centre of the lane is where a rider should be. At a road narrowing, again, that's going through, let's say, past a pedestrian island where there isn't space to be overtaken, then the rider should be in the middle of the lane. So a lot of we encourage our training providers to use sort of simpler terms than secondary and primary when they're talking to, in particular, to children. So the best description I've heard is sort of pass me and follow me, so that we're teaching riders with their own position to tell others, yes, I feel like it is safe for you to pass me, which is your secondary, or follow me, I'm in primary position. I'd like you to remain behind because it is unsafe for you to overtake here. Either I'm in the middle of the moving traffic flow, wait to turn right, so you do need to wait behind as you would any other vehicle, or again, road narrowing, junction, whatever. So it's to be seen, to sometimes see as well, that helps, and to prevent over or under overtaking on the right or on the left. And so that is the primary position, that following position. The secondary, we describe it as just to the left of the traffic flow, or sometimes we use the curb as a reference. So I know no closer than an arm's length through the curb. So they're not riding in the gutter where you're likely to hit the curb with your pedal, hit a drain, hit some detritus or whatever that's sort of sitting there at the road edge, but you're sort of a little bit removed, sort of a bit further away from that. You've got time to swerve either to left if need to, if you do need to take some evasive action. But it's typically a position where another faster moving road user may overtake, obviously giving them as much room as they'd give a car, that 1.5 meters, and where that rider feels it is safe for them to let other road users overtake them. So that you've got those two road positions, primary, secondary. The only other two, the time where that may change is when you're passing parked cars. So we recommend obviously that riders are out of the door zone. Obviously you need to be looking into vehicles, seeing if there's clues that somebody's in it or about to get out, whether that's lights on, engine on, somebody in it. But again, we want riders to be outside that door zone. So if somebody does open the door, obviously again you've got the touch reach, which is hopefully being taught to every new learner, where you open the door with your with the arm furthest from it, forcing a look over the shoulder. But that is a potential move away from primary or secondary for a really good reason. So again, if you see a rider moving, riding a door's width away from a car, that is why. That's literally what they are avoiding. And the only other thing is blind, which may affect a rider's position, of blind spots. Can we go into blind spots on for people who drive, and whether it's lorry, obviously lorries generally the big one, but cars as well obviously have their blind spots. So we a repeated message throughout all training is that riders do not ride in those blind spots, and just sort of wait back, typically in primary position where they can see and be seen, and not in a position where the road user, typically in front, does not know where they are, and certainly not moving up at the left of a lorry, let's say, who's turning left. They need to be waiting in primary position behind to then complete their manoeuvre. So that's it. Sorry, I've gone into quite a lot of the weeds a little bit there, but I feel that's important, so that when you come across a rider who is typically in the middle of the road, it's not to hold up or annoy or be aggressive. It is helpful, assertive riding to prevent hazardous overtaking, where overtaking should not happen. And then finally, the other final one of the core four core functions, obviously observation, communication, position, and priorities. Again, this is stuff that we know. You've got your giveaway lines, who you give way to, and what is taught is exactly the same, in line with the highway code that you will teach. And important to note that we've got the addition of people waiting to cross the road should be given priority by other road users at the top of a T junction. And so if you or your riders come across you and your learners, come across a cycle rider who is perhaps turning left and has stopped in the middle, in primary position in the middle of the lane, it's the reason for that is that they'll be giving priority to a pedestrian to cross the road, and hopefully they'd have managed that relationship with you or your learner beforehand by looking over the shoulder, and moving into that position nice and early so you can see. But that is a real key, a really important thing to be aware of. In a similar way that, again, when you're turning right from a major road to a minor road, the cycle rider will be in the middle of the moving traffic lane, giving way to oncoming traffic. They will need to wait there as well to give way to pedestrians who are crossing, and then complete their manoeuvre. So cycle riders, so there will be you and your learners need to be more aware of that as you approach T junctions. Okay. There's a couple of bits I want to go into as well. One important section that was in the previous training and has made it to the next one as well is around cycle infrastructure. Again, those of you who cycle frequently yourselves probably sort of giving yourselves a wry smile at the moment, but cycling infrastructure does not have to be used by cycle riders. It is there for if the rider thinks it will help their journey or not. And there's some choose to use it, some don't. Again, it's not to be annoying. It is simply, does it help my journey? You may find that some I know we have new guidance, LTN 20, on cycle infrastructure or infrastructure, and that is the the best guidance to date that's been produced by Department for Transport, but a lot of current infrastructure does not meet those standards. You get very short pieces of infrastructure that puts the rider leaves the rider in a very vulnerable or unhelpful spot, and often cycle lanes are not as well maintained as perhaps other bits of infrastructure are. So there may be they may be uncomfortable to use through potholes or damage into the cycle, or just full of ice or leaves or puddles or whatever. Again, that's covered. The only one thing I should have mentioned, actually, sorry, when I'm thinking about road position, is that we've got primary and secondary, but when it comes to people riding alongside each other, so riding two abreast, hopefully as you're all aware, cycle riders may ride two abreast, and there may be some good reasons for that, whether it's a more confident rider shepherding a less confident rider, or even for social reasons. I know the Highway Code talks about, asks riders to single out when to aid overtaking. Now, sometimes that may aid overtaking, sometimes it may not, particularly if you've got a larger group. It is easier if, let's say, I know 12, it'll be easier to overtake a shorter a line of 6 doubled up rather than sort of 12 in one long line. So there may be reasons where riders choose not to single out, and actually that will help you overtake when it is clear to overtake. But again, the attitude for all, and this is baked into all our cycle training, the attitude needs to be, how can I assist and support everyone else, and again behave calmly and predictably on the road. And that mindset is something that we've really increase in our new delivery guidance, which for all our bikeability instructors, which comes out in this month, in fact. Again, whilst it was fairly present, we have now made it even more present. Again, for us, we felt it was important. This is, for a lot of people, and children in particular, their first introduction to using roads, introduction to an adult environment in many ways, and we want to start influencing road culture as much as we possibly can. Now, I guess the then question is, the biggest question is, what does this mean for me? As a learner driver, as a driver myself, as an ADI, all well and good knowing what cycle riders are trained to do. We know that some go through training, some don't. Currently, just over half of all children in Year 6 go through it. That they do retain knowledge, and it is effective to going forward. We have studied that, and we do study that in an ongoing way. And obviously our ambition is that by the end of primary school, every child will have the opportunity to receive cycle training. By 2025 is DFT's self-imposed deadline for that, and obviously we continue to make training available to all adults who want it as well. But not everyone does have cycle training, but so you are going to encounter people who are, again, cycling in the gutter, perhaps not looking around about themselves, not gathering the information through observation as much as they should be, perhaps not communicating their intentions as clearly as they should be, and potentially cycling in a very unpredictable manner as well. You will encounter both. But when you encounter someone who's cycling, I'm sure as you all hopefully teach your learner drivers already, it's it's waiting behind, not too close, until there is a safe and clear space to overtake. And in terms of how far you give, it's 1.5 meters when overtaking cyclists up to speeds of 30 miles an hour, and more space when you're overtaking them at higher speed. So often this will mean you are in the other lane, and then having to wait until it is clear for you to do so. Again, highway code is increases guidance in 2022 of that extra care and space given to motorcyclists, cyclists, horse riders, horse-drawn vehicles, and pedestrians as well. And it's waiting until it is safe for you to overtake if it's not possible, or to meet those clearances, or do so at that point in time. Now, and all this is designed to do is to sort of reduce those areas of conflict. As hopefully, or as I'm sure we're all aware, most sort of KSI stats show that most incidents happen around sort of junctions. So again, if you're not if you're giving space to that rider, whether they're trained or untrained, to move through the junction, whether in primary position or not, then and looking out for them, then you should reduce those. We work together to reduce those stats, and obviously we're asking riders to be in a predominant position to increase their visibility and support driver decision making as well. So that is, I've got about 15 minutes left. I did have some videos, but I probably won't hold fire on those for a minute, videos and illustrations, and just save those for the for you to see on the training itself. But I did want to just open it up for questions from you, and I think and I may sort of use opportunity to pick your brains as well if there aren't questions, because in all our projects we supported by this one included strong working groups, and my own professional practice, I want to be informed by other industry experts, again, as much as I possibly can. So, and apologies again, that was a lot of me talking without use of any PowerPoint or visuals, so hopefully, well, maybe it was a worthwhile nap for you as well, and just bringing in letting you have a bit of a
Sure
rest
not.
and switch
I'm
off.
sure not. It was very interesting and good to get an update from my perspective as well. I know we're involved in the project, but it's good to hear some of the developments that are going on at the moment. I'll just go through some of the things that are in the chat. We haven't got any questions in the Q&A itself, but we have got some chat going on. David has just popped in the chat there that he really enjoyed the training. He felt it's very useful, but he's been trying to give some feedback to you, but has had some difficulties with your portal and being able to feed that back. So he's got his email address there.
Okay.
And his number thoughtfully provided for you. So I don't know whether you want to make a note of that and get in touch with David, so he can give that valuable feedback as a participant in the project. We've got a question from Richard as well about what can bikeability do about addressing the kind of black ninjas, people going out at night with no lights, no reflective clothing, and to be honest, any other what we would call unsafe or antisocial cycling. And there's been a nice response from one of the other delegates on the call about it's quite hard for bikeability to take responsibility for those people, because they're probably the people that aren't compliant by nature and don't engage with channels or organizations that can change their behavior.
It's a fascinating question, because it applies not just to cycling, or it applies to road use in general. People who take risks will take risks, or be non-compliant, whatever mode of transport they choose. And again, it's a wider issue than just sort of road use, isn't it? But it's really important. So within the cycle training, in the very first things that people are taught are sort of a helmet check. People don't. The current UK law is that helmets are not mandatory. They are obviously recommended within the highway code. and there are, you'd be amazed at the width of opinion on helmets, and what people wear when they're riding. But we teach people to, if you're going to wear a helmet, it needs to be fitted correctly. Again, so sitting properly on the head, straps properly done up at the back and around your ears and under the strap. And we talk about the why people may choose to use a helmet, and there's some good research on that. Unfortunately, I mean, I don't know if any of you saw recent fairly big study from Australia a few weeks ago now, that unfortunately they found that the more PPE, let's say, that was worn, the greater dehumanizing effects that had on the drivers then perceive that rider as less than human, the more PPE they wore, which is unfortunate is a poor word to use there, but it's indicative of sort of wider road use problems. But so what we're doing is teaching how to fit correctly, teaching that you should choose appropriate clothing that helps you stand out from your surroundings. So we don't necessarily say, typically within bikeability, most local authorities and training providers insist on high-vis tabards. We I think go a little bit more. I think it's more appropriate to say you need to wear something that stands out from your surroundings, and you need to think about that and think about the colours, where you're riding, the time of day, time of year, and something that what's going to make you more distinctive from everything around you. So that's the information. We do not police road use, and what people do afterwards. We give as much information as we can, and we teach, but then it's that sort of, that's almost that's bittersweet feeling at the end of a bikeability course. Let's say you spent 6 hours with a group of youngsters, you've imparted as much knowledge as you possibly can, you've seen them grow and improve in confidence. Yet they are going to, or your ambition is that their independent decision making is going to be so much better without you there, but they are going to ride them, and they should do, without you there. But at that point you lose all control. Again, the same as you'd encounter with your learner drivers, you teach them as best as you can, and yet I don't know what the stats are, but a whole number of them will not stop at a red light or during their driving career, or drive too fast for the environment. It's exactly the same problem. So we continue to educate, but we cannot police that. Sorry, that's a very long answer to a very short question. I'll try and do better.
No, that's exactly what we're all trying to do as well. We wish we could have some mandating of some level of training, because then we could reach more people.
Yeah.
But that's the challenge we face in driver training, that we can't reach everybody, and even if we do reach and teach, we struggle with some people, that in terms of embedding that knowledge so they become safer. Safe driving for life is an ambition. It's not necessarily a reality. One question I did want to ask you today, Benjamin, is, are your members encountering challenges and risks from the rise in e-scooters on our roads? Because obviously they are sharing your cycle lanes, as well as us seeing some pretty antisocial behavior from them on the open roads.
Yeah, it's a great question. Anecdotally, I haven't had much feedback from our instructor training community on encountering e-scooters. It's obviously e-scooters will actually move faster than a typical cycle rider in many cases, so accelerate a lot quicker. What we are lobbying DFT for is a standard training package for e-scooter riders. Obviously, it's currently legal in private ownership is illegal, and they are legal uses only for the existing operator or selected operator within certain within designated towns. we want to see a sort of ESQ. We are. I am sure that they will be made legal at some point. I cannot see it going the other way. Maybe it will, but I'd be surprised. We want to see a national or somehow it built into a national standard for cycle for training, whether that's the cycle training national standard becoming something a bit bigger for almost all forms of micro mobility, or whether it's a set syllabus, but certainly a particular syllabus that people using a scooter on the road for the first time, an e-scooter on the road for the first time, have to have some level of training. Both off-road and on-road. Typically with e-scooters, most accidents happen in trip 1 or trip 2 because people are not used to the craft itself. But I'm sure you all see a great level of risk taking and a low adherence to the law on e-scooters, which we really want to change. But again, if you think about the four core functions, I have argued and will continue to argue that the way you use an e-scooter on the road should be exactly the same as you'd use a cycle on the road. The road positions should be the same. The primary and secondary, those observations, those communications should be the same. So again, the syllabus is basically written. You could just take out the word cycle from bikeability, replace it with e-scooter, and you would have the syllabus pretty much there, apart from a few nuance changes, actually. So again, sorry, long rambly answer. Answer is sort of not really in terms of affecting our cycle training. But we'd love to see greater input from DFT on mandatory training for e-scooters and those using them for the first time.
Just had a question here. I'm answering it in the chat, but actually I'll give up because I'm doing a very long-winded answer that I can probably do quicker by chatting. We've been asked if Bikeability and DIA have involvement with Project Edward. We certainly do at DIA, and I believe you guys do generally at Bikeability. Our involvement is in different strands within Project Edward, and we work particularly closely with Road Safe Foundation on the delivery of some of their projects that are tied to the wider Project Edward. The most recent project that we've done is to build an information hub online, ADAS hub, which educates people in a much more accessible and quick way about each ADAS technology. And that's a site, if you want to go and visit that, adashub.co.uk, which is designed for ADIs to be able to pass that information on to their pupils, because it's very bite-sized information. There's lots of video content about each type of technology. So yeah, go and check that out. But that's the kind of work that we do within those Project Edward aims. Yeah. And if those who didn't know what Project Edward is, it stands for Every Day Without an Accident or Road. Mnemonics failing me now. Without a road death. Every day without a road death. Yeah. So there's a combination of organisations, because obviously DIA is a membership body for ADIs, but we're also a road safety body, and we do a lot of work in the field of road safety, so wider road safety. So and Bikeability do too. So you'll find quite a lot of things happening under that banner with different organisations working collaboratively together.
Yeah, I mean, obviously our whole vision is very closely aligned to the Project Edward. So we want to see more people using the road more competently, and that leads to less KSIs. So in terms of, we are not an official partner, but actually it's a good challenge, because why would we not? We work with a lot of the we work collaboratively with a lot of the additional organisations that Project Edward do. So whether it's NPCC or sort of RSGB and others, work very, very closely with them on a number of things. But in terms of official partner, no. But I can't see why we wouldn't be in the future, and this is why I love webinars like this, because I get something out of it.
Yeah, it's a great initiative. It's also very much focused on safe systems. So building, a whole world, an environment of safety, not just focusing on elements of in isolation. And you know, people like National Highways are very engaged in that. Not specifically smart motorways in the sense of the very controversial element of them about removing the hard shoulder and now probably having to put it back, but in the wider building roads for the future, which are safer, but also technically more competent, i.e. they can talk to the car can talk to it, to the roads. You know, that's part of smart motorways, and the infrastructure that went in is enabling that in the future. But unfortunately, it kind of got you know, derailed a little bit in terms of its focus, and the focus was all on the hard shoulder stuff instead, which masks a lot of the really good stuff that smart motorways were designed to do anyway. But yeah, there's a week of action of Project Edward as well every May. I think it's like 15th and 19th of May it was this year. So, you know, look out for PR on that as well. You could, you know, also inform your pupils about that kind of action. It's hard. There's a huge amount. You know, road safety is always described as the Cinderella of public health, but actually there's a huge amount of stuff that goes on. And one of the things I do in my, because DIA is part of the Road Safety Delivery Group, which is Department for Transport's advisory group on road safety strategy, policy, legislation, all of that. One of the things that I push back on, being the cynic that I am, is do we have too much road safety activity in some senses and too much doubling up of people doing the same thing but in different areas of the UK, and they're not working together, so we get efficiency of funding, and actually we're not confusing people. If you give some people too much information and too many communications, they get kind of confused and go, whoa, back off, I'm just not going to engage with any of this because there's too much. So we're actually, you know, working with government now to say what's actually really key and important, and how can we get people to work together rather than all this duplication and sometimes some misguided interventions that are going on. You know, one of the challenges is letting driver education expert bodies do the driver education piece rather than, frankly, some have a go heroes from other sectors, you know, having a go at it, but not necessarily having the appropriate level of knowledge and experience to deliver those you know, key driver education messages. So there's a lot goes on, and that's great in one sense, but we need to make sure that what is going on is relevant, meaningful, you know, smart, and you know, good quality at the end of the day, and hits the targets that we want to hit as well. I'm sure you have that frustration as well. You know, even in cycling in isolation, there are lots of, you know, voices about things, but it's about making people work collaboratively to have the best impact on the majority of people, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good point. Because we always say that bikeability is not the silver bullet, or cycle training is one thing, and that is our I mean, whilst there's strands within that, that is our sole focus, but there are other sort of cycling organisations that have slightly different remits. So again, your Cycling UK is around sort of participation, British Cycling on sort of that elite sport, and Sustrans on quite a lot of sort of research and sort of cycle routes. I don't think they will do more than that. So those are hugely broad brushstrokes. But I think totally agree. We're stronger together, but we all need to understand what our niche and expertise is, and work together to amplify what each organisation is doing, and we do our best to be as collaborative as possible, whilst insisting that we are the go-to organisations for cycle training, and we'll always insist that, and always be slightly miffed if somebody else does something in that space without talking to us. But yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, did we have any more questions in the chat?
Because I've realised we didn't do that earlier on, the website address for the project Cycle Savvy Driving. So if you haven't had the opportunity to look at that yet, I've just popped in the chat there the Cycle Savvy specific site, so you can go and look at all the materials there and find out how you can get involved.
We have closed. You can look at that site. You can't access those materials now. Sorry, because we've. But you will really soon. I mean, you can. We'll put that site still live. There's sort of the homepage and one more page there, and we'll put the link. That will then be updated with the new content as soon as we possibly can. But simply because the evaluations and were built in start, middle, and end. There was no way to then leave it live, unfortunately.
Okay.
So I do apologise for that.
Will be returning to that site?
It'll be the same URL. It'll be the same URL.
You can bookmark that URL, people, and then when the new stuff goes live, then you can go straight to it. And to find out more about Bikeability's wider projects as well, you can go to bikeability.org.uk, because there's some really interesting information on there and guidance. I was helping an organisation in Guernsey recently who wanted to, they're a bank in Guernsey, but they wanted to do cycle safety projects on the island and for their corporate social responsibility. And I pointed them to a lot of the Bikeability stuff, because actually Guernsey has quite a lot of cyclists, but not necessarily got a huge amount of cycle programs going on, strangely. So I think AGIs will find that information really useful as well. But so thanks folks for joining us today, and thanks Benjamin for joining us and giving us the lowdown on the project so far, on
Absolute pleasure.
And also answering people's questions. If you've got any more questions for either of us, drop us an email, or drop Bikeability an email as well, or myself. Next webinars coming up, we'll be advertising shortly. I'm planning one on the Milestones projects, which is a Department for Transport and DIA funded study into looking at whether, if we made people learn to drive on a modular basis, as in they have to complete a series of modules with their ADI, delivering that training, but also assessing them and signing them off, and also some supplementary e-learning and e-testing, does that make a difference to new driver outcomes? Does it lower their risk? And that's a really exciting project, because we're going to be, using the ADI's role in a much more kind of, not mandatory, but a much more solid way in not just the delivery of a consistent training, but testing, is there a better capacity for ADIs to take on some of the role of assessing pupils? But it's also about working towards more goals in the learning drive process, improving competency along the way, a bit like the private pilot's license. Those of you who are familiar with the private pilot's license, you can't just rush to go do your final test without training. You have to complete a module, be assessed by your instructor, then go on to the next module, and then you have a final assessment with your trainer, with an independent examiner. And even then, it's graduated licensing, because you can't fly at night on instruments and in adverse weather. You have to take further development in that. So it's a form of graduated learning as well. So we're really excited about that. We'll shortly be starting recruitment of ADIs to be part of the project, and therefore pupils as well. We expect to have about 900 pupils going through the study. One group will do nothing at all. They're what we call a control group. One group will do in-car modular learning and assessments only. The third group will do that, but with e-learning and e-theory tests as well, to see whether e-learning has an impact when it's delivered in tandem with practical driving. So it's a landmark study. I don't think anything like this has ever been done globally. So hopefully when we get that webinar up and running, we'll hope to see some of you on there, and hope to recruit some of you to the project as well, and be part of something quite evolutionary in the process of learning to drive as well. But also drop us your ideas for other webinars that you want to see. We run a load of webinars each month and each year, but we come up with ideas, but we also want to hear from members. What do you want to see us talking about? And we can go and get the appropriate experts if it's not within our own grasp to deliver that particular webinar as well. And one last plug, as you can see behind me here in my background, we've got a DIA conference happening in November. I know some of you attend that on a regular basis. Last year was a cracking event at Brands Hatch in Kent, with a lot of live racing going on outside, which even a motor mouth like me was struggling to be heard at times, but it was very thrilling to see it. This year, we're moving the venue to the British Motor Heritage Museum at Gaydon, one of the largest collections of heritage vehicles in the UK. And the conference ticket includes a ticket to visit the museum, and then time built in for you to tour those exhibits as well. We'll be joined by Road Safety Minister and Under Secretary of State for Transport, Richard Holden, who you'll be able to ask your questions of, as well as hear about important governmental developments in terms of driver licensing, testing and strategy. And we'll also be joined by Loveday Ryder, Chief Executive of DVSA, who I know people always like to ask questions of and give their two penny worth too. And that's what the conference is about, having these major stakeholders in our world hear your voices and hear your ideas and views, not just listen to them update us on what's going on as well. So I'm sure we'll have some interesting debates at the conference. And then there'll be an afternoon of workshops looking at everything from emotional intelligence and why that's useful in driver training, to DVSA delivering some workshops on standards checks and development of performance set against the national standards as well. So hope you can all join us there. Tickets available now. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you all soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.